The Laura Ingraham Show.
Even with the English accent, it doesn't really shock me. However, I was a bit surprised to see him invited to the American Conservative Union CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee, meeting in Washington this week. Now, this is a big sort of a who's who of the conservative movement. And it was odd that of all the people invited, there was Milo Yiannopoulos being invited not only to speak, but to keynote the conference. Usually the keynote is some major political figure. Now, their thinking was that, and we will have Matt Schlapp, the chairman of the American Conservative Union, on later. The thinking was that, well, he's part of a new voice, a new emergent voice. Young people are listening to this guy, so he deserves a platform. When I first heard it, I said, are we sure about this? I mean, first of all, I wouldn't let young people in my life that I care about listen to Milo because, not because I'm worried that, that he would offend me, but frankly, that he would mislead them. I mean, morality is not exactly high on Milo's, to-do list. And because of the shock factor, he's an openly gay man who likes to advertise the fact, and all manner of his proclivities. And I'm trying to keep this clean for a family show. Watch me strain and dance, Drew. He likes to avail the public of intimate details of his personal life. Is that nice? Intimate life. As he did during a radio interview that blew this whole thing up over the weekend, where he got to talking about men having sexual relations with boys.
This arbitrary and oppressive idea of consent, which totally destroys, the understanding that many of us have of the complexities and subtleties and complicated nature of many relationships. People are messy and complex, and actually, in the homosexual world, particularly, now, some of those relationships between younger boys and older men, the sort of coming of age relationships, the relationships in which those older men help those young boys to discover who they are and give them security and safety and provide them with love.
Oh, yeah, provide them with love. It's called abuse. It's called preying on the young. I want your reaction to this. 855-40-LAURA, 855-40-LAURA. We will take your calls on this because I'm interested to hear, how does the Heartland feel about this? Is there room for a guy like this in the conservative movement? Should he be platformed? Is that acceptable to you? Would you pay to come to D.C. to hear Milo? Now, he has spoken at campuses and universities all over the country. There have been riots. There have been, people protesting his appearance. Now, I will say this. Let me be very clear on this point. Free speech does require us to allow those to speak, even those we might be offended by. There's a lot of offensive talk out there. There are a lot of people that I don't particularly care to even see, think, or consider. Nonetheless, they have a constitutional right to speak. And if you're going to allow people on the other extreme to speak out, you must allow a guy like Milo to do so. So I would defend his right to speak in a university setting. The question is, should he be platformed by a group like CPAC, and should he be elevated to the level of a conservative leader? Do you buy that? 855-40-LAURA. We will take your calls. Now, he's had his book deal blown up over these comments about pedophilia. He was disinvited from CPAC over the weekend. And, to be truthful, I've seen some of the other commentary. He said some pretty inflammatory, downright nasty things about blacks and Jews, and I'm not going to read them. I'm just not going to go there. Personally, this is not my. I'll be very honest. Full disclosure, it's not my cup of tea. I don't find it all that interesting. It's not compelling. It's not edgy to me. I grew up, going in New Orleans and then at NYU. We had, People acting flamboyantly and drag queens are not impressive to me. I mean, nor are they particularly anything new. It's like, okay, there he goes. Oh, nice spangles, like that hair bow. But, we're supposed to be shocked, I think, by Milo. Lots of calls coming in. We will get to a few of them. And then I want to get into President Trump Over the weekend, he talked about the press being the enemy of the people, very frustrated that he feels his message is being somehow muddled, sabotaged, undermined by the media. Is that true? Do you think that's true? And then I want to get into the media reaction and even what I would call a new vanguard of opposition to Donald Trump within the Republican Party. John Kasich, John McCain, Senator McCain. We're going to get into all of that. We have a packed show for you over the next few hours. Byron York, the Washington Examiner, chief political correspondent, will be here. Andy McCarthy will examine these new Department of Homeland Security regulations. You will be very interested to hear. And they're updating that executive order on immigration. That's going to happen today. We're going to give you a sneak peek at that. Pat Buchanan, presidential candidate and advisor to Nixon, Ford, Reagan, he will be here to talk about Trump at 1 month. And Matt Schlapp, the chairman of the American Conservative Union, a friend of mine, will be joining us to talk about his decision to invite and then disinvite Milo Yiannopoulos. This is like a tongue twister this early in the morning. Okay, let's go to the phones here. Jeff from Arkansas. Where? Alaska. Sorry, I misread that. Alaska. I hope you're not too cold there, Jeff. Your thoughts on Milo being invited and then disinvited. Should he be considered part of the conservative movement?
Hi, Raymond. Man?
You're on.
Yes. Okay. I think he should be considered part of it. See, when I first heard Milo about a year and a half ago, and when I first heard him, I didn't know how to take him. But then I decided, well, I'm going to listen to the guy.
Okay, and what is it? What is he saying that's conservative, Jeff, in your opinion?
Well, if you follow him, he's extremely conservative. But and the point is that he's usually taken out of context. Okay, so I mean, my question to you, I mean, I can understand the bite you played. I didn't hear that talk that he gave or whatever the context was with that.
Well, it was a conversation, Jeff. It was a conversation that he was having about consent, the age of consent, and then he went on to talk about being abused himself by a member of the clergy. And I can't even get into the commentary. I mean, it's just, this is a family show, there are children listening, but he was talking about how this particular pederast is responsible for his great techniques in the boudoir. Boy, is that a cleaned up way of saying it. If I repeated what he said, Jeff, it's not conservative to me.
That's just the way he put it.
Yeah, I mean, conservatism also, when you think about it, if you read Washington, as I did just the other day, because was President's Day, when you read the founders, morality, a sense of encouraging virtue in the people, that is part of conservatism. And then preserving liberty, allowing people to pursue happiness in the ways they can without violating the rights of others. Fantastic. But when you're saying, hey, these kinds of relations can be a turn on and actually a good thing, no, you're chasing down a child. No, it's never a good thing. It's never a good thing. And it should be condemned. Mike, in Arizona, your thoughts, Mike?
Arkansas, Raymond.
Arkansas. You see, I'm all over the place. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
That's okay. Hey, I got to tell you, as a traditional Catholic, I believe that Milo is dangerous to the conservative movement. And the reason I say that is this: for years, the abnormal sex group has been trying to normalize its existence through society, culture, television, you name it. They're trying to make broader society feel that they're normal when we all know that that is abnormal. Now, the last bastion or beachfront against them is conservatism. And we are now the homophobes, et cetera, all of those phobic things that they call us. So what Milo is he is a Trojan horse. He is a conservative, but he brings this lifestyle into the party or into the movement, and that will undermine and in a sense accept what he's doing as I see it over time. Not today, not tomorrow, but down the road it will have that effect.
Very good. Mike, thanks for the comment. We are going to continue talking about this, the Milo controversy, and the neocons, members of the Republican Party now coming out against Trump, and it seems to be organized. We'll get into all of it. This is the Laura Ingraham Show. Raymond Arroyo sitting in for the great lady. Much to share with you. Stay right here. I want to know what you think about this. He's been... his publishing contract was pulled. His speaking slot at CPAC was pulled. See, I don't. We can quibble about whether he should be invited to CPAC or not. That's one thing. The publishing thing, everybody should be allowed to be published. Again, there's free speech, and it is very curious at this moment when we have the media saying, wait a minute, we're the First Amendment, the Fourth Estate, the Donald Trump saying we're the enemy of the people, we have a constitutional right to do. Very interesting that we want to, take the barricades on this issue of freedom of speech, but when speech makes us uncomfortable, or awakens us to things we're not ready to deal with, we don't want to hear that speech. Shut that speech up, shut it down, don't publish, don't talk, don't invite. See, that perhaps goes too far. I want to go to Gary. Gary in Florida, you wanted to say what about this Milo Yiannopoulos situation?
Yeah, Raymond, I'm an openly gay man. I'm retired military and a conservative, so there's a bag for you.
Well, thank you for your service.
I say in the Navy that your alligator mouth is overriding your hummingbird backside, and I think he succumbed to that, and that's kind of his own fault.
So you think he's a little over his skis? You're disturbed by what he says?
No, I'm not disturbed. I think he's got a good heart. I've listened to him for a long time, and I just think he got, like you said, a little over his skis, and he's going to have to do some explaining. Do some splaining, as they say.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. Teresa from Texas, you wanted to say what? Very quickly on this issue.
I think he has the right to speak. I just think that the real Trojan horse are the people who hired him at CPAC. We shouldn't make excuses for being conservatives. We're the only animal that doesn't always follow our instinct. And my instinct when I heard that was this should be thought out and not based on what's the hot topic of the day. We've succumbed to letting the left say that because we're conservative, that means we hate or have a phobia, and we don't. But I think our gut tells us his extreme way of saying things need to be thought out. Maybe a side speaker, but not a keynote. I love people, and I want to be fair to people, but there's something in my gut that says that this needs to be more well thought out, and to not fall into that trap of, we're going to include everybody, so that we look like we love everybody when we know we do, but we are conservative for who we are. So
very good. Thank you, Teresa, for the comment. I tend to agree with you. I think, look, everybody should be allowed to speak. It's America. And even there are many, many uncomfortable characters that, frankly, I don't want to listen to. But you know what? It's not up to me to decide what Americans can hear. The fact is there is some audience for that person, and they should be allowed that platform. And by denying them a platform, on some level, you deny yourself a platform, because tomorrow someone will come and say, and this is the hypocrisy that I get outraged by. Okay, you can say this guy shouldn't be at this event or that event. However, Milo himself has come out and said, I'm partly to blame. He said that in his apology. Following this, these sort of traumatic events, the invite and then the disinvite. But it is imperative, I think, that all of us defend the right of people to speak publicly, but not every platform is correct for every speaker. And the difference of speaking at a public university, in a public forum there, or being published where it's a money-making operation, or attending a conservative political action committee. Those are three different venues requiring three different people and types of people. One can invite or disinvite at a private gathering, but public space, that should be sacrosanct. Everybody should be welcome, including Milo's voice. Much more ahead. The Laura Ingraham Show continues. Raymond Arroyo sitting in for the great lady. I am going to give away a Will Wilder 2, The Lost Staff of Wonder's book, to the best call of the day. So look forward to that. Coming up, Byron York, and we'll get into the conservative resistance to Donald Trump. Stay right there. Joining us now, Byron York, Washington Examiner chief political correspondent, of course, a Fox News contributor and a regular here on the Laura Ingraham Show. Byron, great to be with you.
Hi, Raymond. Thanks for having me.
Hey, let's start with what we heard from Mike Pence. I mean, the coverage, as you've written about, I just read your piece the other day when you dropped it in the Washington Examiner on Pence at NATO. And the reportage was, he's there to reassure the allies, but he really then echoed Donald Trump's promises during the campaign to make the other members of this alliance pay their fair share. What was the reaction?
The reaction was, now first you have to, you kind of have to set this up with all the controversy that went on. That Trump was dangerous to the future of NATO, dangerous to the free world. He had said NATO was obsolete, which caused much hair to become on fire, and this was just really, really crazy. And basically Pence goes to Europe, and he does reassure NATO of the U.S. support of NATO, and then he says, but you've got to do what you've got to do. You've got to pay your fair share. You need to reorient to some degree your focus toward radical Islamic terrorism. President Trump said you have to do it, and you have to. And they said, yes, sir. I mean, it was really quite Pence, as a matter of fact, I'll just give you an idea how blunt he was. He said, look, you've already agreed to spend 2% of your GDP on defense. Most of you don't do anywhere near that. And he said, so we want you to accelerate your plans to get there, quote, and if you don't have a plan, get one. That's not the most diplomatic language in the world, but I think the story there was, one, Trump's demands were entirely reasonable, and two, NATO meekly went along.
No, well, I didn't realize that only 4 countries of the 28 members of NATO are actually fulfilling their obligations financially. I mean, that's outrageous.
Yeah, the idea, and they had agreed in 2014 that they needed to pay more, and this figure of 2% of GDP was agreed upon. And 4 countries, plus the United States, already pay at least the 2.0% level. The United States pays nearly 4 of a huge GDP. And Germany, for example, biggest economy in NATO, in the EU, spends about 1%. So, I mean, they really, really need to get going on that. And so I think basically what you saw is a Trump campaign promise turn into an actual policy in Europe.
Incredible. No, it's incredible to watch, and we'll see how this plays out. But what options do the members of this alliance have? They have to play along and fulfill their obligations, and it's good that they were put on notice. Byron, you've written about something, and I've been seeing this pop up in Kathleen Parker and Jennifer Rubin's articles in the Washington Post and in other places. Now we have Democratic Representative Earl Blumenauer suggesting that the 25th Amendment be invoked vis-a-vis Donald Trump. Tell us what this is about. I'm sure a lot of people aren't even familiar with the 25th Amendment, its origins, and why the rush to invoke this when we're barely a month into this new administration.
Well, the interesting thing is the New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof said it the bluntest, which was, I think he did a column which was, how can we get rid of Trump? And basically this is the people who style themselves the resistance, wanting to get rid of the president. Impeachment is the constitutionally prescribed method, but it could take a long time. Republicans control the House and the Senate. I mean, we have to wait 2 years, and Democrats could take control, and then maybe they could impeach. It's too long. So let's try the 25th Amendment. 25th Amendment was ratified in 1967, and it actually, we all know that impeachment is the constitutional method for removing the president, but basically the 25th Amendment created another method for removing the president. And what you've seen is a lot of talk about the possibility of somehow declaring the president to be disabled, unable to perform his duties, and thus could be removed from office. And the Constitution in this 25th Amendment basically creates a process by which the vice president and a majority of cabinet officers, or another such body as Congress may by law designate, declare the president to be unfit. And so this is something I think you're going to see a lot of buzz on the left about. The Earl Blumenauer, the very liberal representative from Oregon, also Jackie Speer, the very liberal representative from California, are talking about this now, and there will be a group to start studying how could we remove President Trump.
We're talking with Byron York on the Laura Ingraham Show. Byron, I want to shift gears a little bit. We are hearing a lot of resistance from within conservatism. Or purported conservatism. In the day when Milo Yiannopoulos, this controversial Breitbart editor and provocateur, is invited to CPAC and then disinvited, he loses his publishing contract. People say he shouldn't be allowed to speak. At the same time, you have journalists just rending their garments over Trump, saying the media is the enemy of the people. There seems to be a disconnect here. And then there's this from John McCain. I want you to react.
You believe the press is the enemy? Do you believe any group of Americans are the enemy of another group of Americans?
If you want to preserve democracy as we know it, you have to have a free and many times adversarial press. And without it, I'm afraid that we would lose so much of our individual liberties over time. That's how dictators get started.
That's how dictators get started. Your reaction, Byron York.
You know, some of this talk got to be kind of boring. I think, look, there's no doubt that I think that some members of the press have been extremely adversarial toward the president. But this idea that Trump is conducting some sort of war on the press strikes me as just ridiculous. Give a few reasons. One, Trump has a multi-decade history of working with the press. He has a codependent relationship with the press. He doesn't hate the press. He uses the press.
Right.
They use him. That's what codependency is about. Second reason, Trump has not used the powers of the presidency to restrict the press. If, like Barack Obama, he declares Fox News' James Rosen a co-conspirator in a leak case, then I think we should all be very concerned. But that hasn't happened. And finally, there is no chilling effect. I mean, there's no evidence that anybody in the press has felt intimidated into silence by Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, it seems just the opposite. They're talking like mad. So, I mean, this idea that Trump is restricting the press and thus American democracy seems to be really overdone.
Mm-hmm. No, but there's is the drum being banged on this thing? I mean, from all quarters.
Yeah,
John Kasich
there's a big dark spot right in the middle of the drum where they're banging it.
Right, exactly. At this moment, Donald Trump, the president, is at the African American History Museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C. He is pledged to heal racial divisions during an interview with NBC. A smart move, given the attacks upon him, Byron, to go there?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it always has been during the campaign. And, you know, a lot of people said during the campaign, well, you know, Trump is insane. He says he's going to get a significant amount of African-American votes, and, you know, that's nuts. And, of course, Republicans in our current political situation don't get many black votes in presidential elections. And Trump, I think, did a little better than Romney. But, you know, not well. And I mean, if Republicans could improve their performance to 15 or 20%, I mean, that would just be historic for them. But so far, they haven't been able to do that. But obviously, it seems just smart for two reasons. One, Black Americans are a large part of the American population. And two, they're a large part of the Democratic coalition. And if you could improve Republican relations and appeal to black voters, what's not to like about that?
Yeah, I agree. Very good. Byron York, thank you so much for being here. We will continue to read your great columns at the Washington Examiner. And thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Raymond.
We'll talk to you soon. We're going to take a very quick break. When we return, we'll be looking at these immigration orders. They'll be updated today and much more. The Laura Ingraham Show continues. Raymond Arroyo sitting in for the great lady. Keep it right there. These immigration orders, you remember the executive order that the courts put on hold just a few weeks ago. The president was determined to redraft those. I said at the time when the courts first stopped this, when the guy in Seattle said, no, you can't go forward with this. I said what they should be repealing and replacing is the executive order. Forget Obamacare for right now. Do that executive order, repeal and replace that, and write it in a tailored way so that it avoids constitutional problems, avoids court challenges, and see if that works out. Now, if this holds, the new order, according to a draft that the Associated Press got, I didn't get a copy, it would focus on the same 7 countries, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, but it would only bar entry to those without a visa and who have never entered the U.S. before, unlike the original order. People from those countries who already have permanent U.S. residency, green cards, or visas would not face any restrictions. What do you make of that? Is it time for this kind of ban? 855-40-LAURA. As I said earlier, the best calls of the day, I'm going to give away 2. I'm going to be very generous. I have a new book coming out. If you have a young reader in your life, or even if you just love fantasy adventures, I have a new book called Will Wilder 2. It's the second in a series, The Lost Staff of Wonders. And in it, my protagonist, Will Wilder, who has a supernatural gift, the museum at the center of town houses the staff of Moses, the original, and it goes missing. And he is, well, I won't say, but he is charged with stealing the staff. And lo and behold, the town of Perilous Falls becomes subject to a series of plagues, which some might find quite familiar. Blood in the water, frogs appearing. Poor Will and the town really find themselves on the receiving end of a lot of supernatural phenomena, and the time is ticking. They have to find the staff and stop this new evil that has risen. Will Wilder 2, The Lost Staff of Wonders, hits bookstores March 7th. You can pre-order now on Amazon and everywhere books are sold. Also, go to lauraingraham.com. We're also on Facebook, and you can find me at raymondarroyo.com. We will continue to report on these DHS guidelines coming out today. General Kelly issuing all kinds of new memos that will affect the security of the country. And, of course, any moment, President Trump will announce updated immigration executive orders. This will affect all of us. Attorneys who led the charge against Trump's first executive order remain confident that they'll prevail in court again. They claim that the core problem is religious discrimination, that somehow this discriminates against religious individuals because you're targeting majority Muslim countries. I don't know if that's going to wash. I mean, it is in the president's constitutional portfolio to govern immigration. He can set those regulations. And if there's a country of particular interest, or rather of threat to the United States, he can certainly limit or for a short period of time stop immigration from that region until they get a hold on where they are. Our number, 855-40-LAURA. Also coming across this, I'd love to hear your reaction to this. Are congressional Republicans failing Trump and his agenda? I'm going to share that with you. We'll get into this new executive order on immigration and much more. The Laura Ingraham Show continues. She's at Ingraham Angle on Twitter. I'm at Raymond Arroyo on Twitter. That was some of the nicer things they said. They went on and on.
Can you really lay out the red carpet for someone who has talked about grabbing women by the
Members of Parliament went there.
I think about a man who thinks it's okay to go and grab.
No, I've got to stop it. It's so outrageous. I mean, it really is. It really is outrageous. That was Tulip Siddiq and David Lammy, who were very concerned about inviting President Trump. And they said it is a matter of the safety of the Queen is at stake. We can't possibly invite Donald Trump because the Queen would be at stake. And you see, if you invite him in a state visit, he would, of course, have to meet with Her Royal Highness. Have you been watching The Crown? Have you seen The Crown? Who's watching The Crown? 855-40-LAURA. I want to know who's watching The Crown. This is one of the best shows since The Sopranos. I don't watch TV. I hate TV. I find it predictable, boring. The performances are lousy. It's poorly directed. The pacing is either too slow, Downton Abbey fans, listen, or too quick. I just can't follow it. The Crown is majestic television. You know why? It's historically accurate, beautifully acted, and the scripts are top-notch. And there are only 10 episodes. You can burn through them in like a weekend. I've been watching The Crown, so this is on my mind. But this is hardly Churchillian behavior we're seeing from the MPs in Labour. So, I mean, this is a woman who's lived through a world war. She's made it through the Falklands. She made it through, Tony Blair's leadership. I think she can survive meeting Donald Trump for a dinner. I don't think that'll be a problem. They did play that funny moment where Obama, in that Jeannie Moe story, where Obama is toasting the Queen, and he's like going on, and of course then he steps on her the British, what do you call it, national anthem. Play that. He turns to the Queen, and she just casts her eyes down and waits. She doesn't even look at him. She just casts down. It's funny. Anyway, there's a lot of news out there. That this is a sort of minor sideline, but boy, there are passions aflame in Britain, and you have little people protesting. But these protests, they don't amount to very much. It's a little like the "Not My President" protests that were threatened yesterday. Did you see these? Any of you attend any of these? I want to hear if you attended a "Not My President" protest yesterday. 855-40-LAURA. First of all, I want to know, why would you go and attend a "Not My President" rally? I mean, I understand agitating for an issue and saying, look, I'm here for whatever rights, or I'm here for, fair wage or whatever. That's fine. You can agitate and organize. In fact, that would be good. We should have an engaged populace. But it would be a little bit like, and I'm not here protest. I'm not here. I'm protesting my presence because I'm really not here. Guys, you can't protest reality. Like it or not, he's your president. There are a lot of people who didn't like Barack Obama as their president, but guess what? He was their president. We're not allowed. None of us are entitled to an alternative existence, okay? Well, you may not like reality. You can change reality, but you can't avoid reality. That's why we have fiction. I love fiction. I'm a fiction writer. I love fiction, but you can't live there. It's very dangerous to live there. In fact, Drew, I think, sent me a piece, and there is a website where people can indulge the fantasy that Hillary Clinton is their president. What is it? Fake headlines? What is it? What's on the site?
It is a fake headlines news piece, but you're right. It's actually like a little fake website they can go on. It's like, Hillary's the president and I feel okay. And then, a lot of what's going on here is... she's offering like her 100 days appraisal and the inviting, I don't know. The funniest signage that I saw from the weekend, Raymond, I don't know if you saw this or not, but it's like, these snowflakes will cause a blizzard. These snowflakes will cause a blizzard. I'm like, how cheesy is that? Because, they're called the little cuddled snowflakes. Like that. They got to get better with the signage. Well, they really do. And there's only been thousands of them. This wasn't millions of people. Now, I will say it was mostly not a lot like heated moments, only in like Seattle. So there really wasn't that much controversy. No one got hurt or anything like that.
No, well, this is
but it's silly, like you said. You can't live in an alternative reality.
You can't live in an alternative reality, and I'm just a wee bit tired of people trying to agitate for an alternative reality. You can't do it. We can't live there. But they promised there were going to be these tsunami-like protests yesterday on Not My President Day, and it didn't turn out. No. Nobody showed. I mean, it was little groups. It's a little bit like that Day Without Immigrants thing. All those people get fired. What, 100 people get fired?
Yes.
We're going to talk about that later. these guys took the day off from work and then woke up to have no job.
It was it was several different companies, and it was like 18 here, 20 people here, and and some of the owners of the construction projects, brick builders, they said we'll train and we'll replace. We'll train.
Well, you know what? Well, you see, if you take part in a Day Without Immigrants Day, you have a Day Without Job Day afterward. That's that's the follow-on. They didn't get that memo. That's what comes next. Through. Okay, a lot of you are calling. You still want to talk about Milo Yiannopoulos, the guy who was invited to CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee, big sort of dog and pony show here in Washington each year, where all the leaders of the party really come together, the political leaders. Of course, last year, Laura Ingraham interviewed Chris Christie at that CPAC. The president at that time didn't show up.
No, he did not. I was just about to say that.
Year.
Just about to say that. They were out to get him last year.
Okay, so some of you want to still talk about Milo. I'll entertain it for about 2 more minutes, then I'm moving on. George from Texas, you say what?
Like you said, the freedom of speech in this country, we are allowed to, speak freely. And it's up to us to decide if we want to go and watch that guy or not.
Correct.
That's what I think. I don't believe in riots because of a guy, you don't agree with some guy's point of view. I think you should just stay home. And if you don't want to go and listen to that guy, just, stay far away from him.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, George. I mean, we should have the right to choose when it comes to speakers. I mean, it's like this show. I know people are drawn to tune in because you're listening to the mellifluous tones and getting this logic, but there are people who might say, you know what, I'm not interested. That's their right. And it is ours to speak. We all have that right. It's constitutional. Carrie from Texas, you don't have a problem with Milo's comment, the one about pedophilia?
I have no problem at all with his comment. I think it was taken out of context. And in recent, with all the controversy he's had, I think some people were just looking to jump on the bandwagon of hating Milo. Yeah, well,
there's no doubt. And look, we've seen the character assassination that takes place with anybody who begins to either get a platform and certainly run for office or hold a position of service in the government. These people are targeted and attacked. That happens. I mean, Clarence Thomas, we have the president at the African American History Museum. There is no display nor marker of Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice, in that museum. It's outrageous. It's outrageous that he's not in any way commemorated. Now, there's a movement to correct that difficulty, but that's but a little example. And talk about a guy who was demonized. The man was demonized in the most horrendous ways. But, Carrie, I have to take a little issue. I mean, I think the reason that CPAC backed off, I think the reason that Simon & Schuster backed away from Milo was that the comments on pedophilia, I can't play them on the radio. I'm not going to play them. They get rather explicit, but they were... and he says it himself. I was to blame. An imprecision of language. He shouldn't have used the term boy when talking about predation and having an affair with an older man. The language was not warranted and not careful enough. And when you are in the public eye, you do have an obligation to sort of speak sense. And it gave the impression that he was condoning pedophilia, or certainly older men having affairs with boys, 13-year-olds.
I think some people took it that way, but I will tell you, when I first heard the comment, that's not how I took it at all. I understood exactly what he meant, and understanding, and isn't he British as well?
He is British. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do believe that the context of words and the way things are explained and held and the sarcasm is different than it is over here.
Well,
I personally did not take any offense with it at all when it was first said.
Well, Carrie, do you have children, Carrie?
Yes, I do.
You do? Well, I have a 13-year-old boy, and I can tell you, I wouldn't want him subjected to the things that, were being suggested there, and I don't think that one benefits or learns in any way from being preyed on by an older man in a sexual way. I'm sorry, that's my position, and I think most people would agree with that. I defend Milo's ability and freedom to speak out. He should be allowed to, particularly on these campuses, but some of the speech here was beyond the pale, and that's why they had to take him out. I mean, CPAC couldn't let him speak because, it ran afoul of their membership, and they have to make money and keep their members happy as well. And I think that's what happened. We will talk to Matt Schlapp, who's the chairman of the American Conservative Union, later. Kerry, thank you for the comment. When we return, we're going to give you a sneak peek of Donald Trump's updated executive order on immigration. We'll also talk about these incredible memos coming out of the Department of Homeland Security. What will they do to keep refugees, immigrants, and people that might mean us harm screened? What does extreme vetting mean under the Trump administration? Andy McCarthy, former chief assistant U.S. attorney in New York, will join us when the Laura Ingraham Show continues. Raymond Arroyo sitting in for the great lady. Keep it right here. And we're going to get into all of this. This is the Laura Ingraham Show with Andy McCarthy. He's the former chief assistant U.S. attorney of New York and a contributing editor at National Review. He writes wisely and widely on these topics. Andy, thanks for being with us.
Raymond, my pleasure. How are you?
I'm well. Tell me about this. I mean, according to the reportage on this and a draft that the Associated Press has seen, Trump plans on continuing to focus on the same 7 countries mentioned in his first executive order: Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. And it would only bar entries to those without a visa or those who've never entered the United States before. Is that satisfactory to avoid constitutional challenges and court challenges and review?
Well, yeah, Raymond, I think that nothing's going to be satisfactory to the people who are of ideological mind to challenge this that will prevent them from levying constitutional challenges. The question is, can the Trump administration narrow the target so that they can be a little bit more on offense than defense when they're litigating before the courts? Mm-hmm. And the other thing I guess I'd stress is, if you think, as I think, that the Ninth Circuit and some of the other courts that have looked at this, but the Ninth Circuit's the most important one. Right. If you think, as I think, that they were wrong, then, there's a limit to how much Trump can do in the sense that ultimately what he wants to do, if he gets prevented from doing it by the Ninth Circuit, that doesn't mean he's wrong. It just means it may need to be resolved by the Supreme Court, which could also be wrong, by the way. But,
right.
I think they can improve their litigating position by avoiding some of the things that got them on the defensive the first time around, like applying the guidance to green card holders and having a situation where people were given lawful visas and then stopped from coming into the country once they got here. They can obviously address those things. But if what you're talking about is the president's statutory and constitutional authority to, in his discretion, keep people who he deems to be a threat out of the United States, and the Ninth Circuit seeming disagreement with that proposition, I think that's simply something that has to be resolved because the Ninth Circuit is wrong about it.
Andy McCarthy, I have to ask you about this. The ACLU and others are saying, no, even if he updates this thing, it's still going to, this executive order on immigration, it will still be problematic to them because they believe that there is a religious presumption here, that there's it gives preference to religious minorities, and that's a no-no under the Constitution.
Well, evidently the part that explicitly gave preference on refugees to religious minorities is part of what's going to be stricken from the order.
Andy McCarthy, thank you for that. We will stay in touch. The Lord. And Reagan, Pat, thank you for being with us.
Delighted, Raymond. How are you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. I want to get into this, what you've been seeing over the last few days. You heard Rand Paul reacting to McCain. McCain just seems to be running his own operation here. He and Lindsey Graham are basically, the attack squad within the GOP. How long can they sustain this? And who's their audience besides the people on the left?
I think a lot of people in the city who are their audience, and a lot of anti-Trump people who are their audience, and a lot of interventionists and folks who think these recent wars were pretty wonderful and we need a couple of more. But what they're doing is setting themselves up, McCain and Graham. I can understand it. They have no national ambitions left, but they hope to make themselves sort of the South Pole to the North Pole that Trump represents, and that they are the voice inside, the dissenters inside the Republican Party, and in the anticipation that something's going to happen to Trump, and people will say, gee, we should have listened to McCain and Graham. And they get tremendous press from this. They travel all over the world and speak up there. From a purely personal self-interest part on their part, it makes a lot of sense what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Pat, I before I move on, I want to talk about Russia and a couple of other things here. Big news day. We've been getting calls all morning about this Milo Yiannopoulos invite to the Conservative Political Action Committee, then the disinvite. His book contract was canceled. Look, if anybody is the godfather of conservatism, it's Patrick Buchanan. Your thoughts on this Milo character? Should he have been invited in the first place?
Well, my view, I would not have invited him, but let me say this. I mean, there is this element of humor here, and that CPAC is going to show up the terrible speech codes being imposed on campuses that don't let Milo speak, and then they don't let Milo speak. As what is the comedian that says, you can't make this stuff up?
Yeah, exactly.
But here's my view. Look, yeah. It's an excellent issue, and just, in this sense, philosophical sense.
Yeah.
Is where are the lines to be drawn as to what is tolerable and moral and acceptable speech, and who draws those lines?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the 1950s, when I was growing up, you could hear a lot of people talk and use ethnic slurs and things like that, but certain words in the moral code, in terms of sexuality, were taboo, and you'd be thrown off the 7 forbidden words, and you'd be thrown off radio and TV.
Right.
All those things have fallen down, and however you make certain comments, ethnic comments, and you're gone forever. But what to me it shows is that the society's lines are, they're almost gone, but we do have, apparently, you cannot celebrate pedophilia.
Wow, what high standards we have.
What a vicious... Well, we're right next to now we're at the Third Reich because you can't openly champion pedophilia.
Yeah.
It just shows you what a mess our society is in.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on, Pat, because I don't want to get you into any trouble here. You'll be invited to CPAC before long and disinvited.
I'm left on the far side of that line long ago.
Now when Pat Buchanan can't get invited to CPAC, but Milo is. Something has happened here. We'll discuss that later. Tell me about this Russia. You recently wrote a great piece. Is the Trump-Putin détente dead? And this dropped today. And it was it really is about this relationship where Trump was really talking about closer relations with Russia. Is that possible, given the climate he's facing here in Washington? And just to give you a little taste, this is Lindsey Graham.
If you're worried that we're not going to look long and hard at what Russia did in our election because Trump won and Republicans in charge, you don't need to worry about that. We are. And 2017 is going to be a year of kicking Russia in the ass in Congress.
Lovely. The statesman, the rhetoric is so high-flying, Pat. Your reaction to this?
Well, there's a couple of points. Just what we said earlier in terms of Graham and McCain. McCain does not deliver a speech without talking about Putin as a thug, a murderer, a killer, etc. And Graham saying the same thing. They are the pivot point of the anti-Putin, anti-Russia forces up on the Hill, and there are major voices in that. Let me say this: the choices for the State, Defense, CIA, and the new NSC advisor are excellent in terms of talent and ability. But the question that really comes is, Trump ran on a certain campaign that he's going to try to end this second Cold War with Russia and work with them against the radical Islamist terrorists, ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And the question is is he going to be able to implement a Trumpian foreign policy which would, seek better relations with the Russians and tell the Europeans to start paying more of their own way and staying out of these wars? Is he going to be able to do that, given the forces not only in his own cabinet, who have vested interests, many of them brilliant guys, but vested interests in the mistakes of the past, given the opposition of the Washington Post and the interventionists, given the opposition of McCain, etc.? Is he going to be able to implement a Trumpian foreign policy, as he described it in the campaign, or will he basically be broken and accommodate himself to the demands of this city, which are for continuation of what was going on? This city was repudiated in the election, and this is the comeback that is taking place right now.
Pat, what do you make of this new national security advisor, General H.R.McMaster? He was announced yesterday by the president down in Mar-a-Lago. He's being billed as somebody who will tell truth to power. He wrote, of course, that 1997 book, Dereliction of Duty, which criticized the Joint Chiefs for not standing up to LBJ during the Vietnam conflict. Your take on him, is this... I always get a little worried when both right and left, the establishments on both sides, are sort of applauding a Trump pick. Is this a good thing?
Well, I do the same. When you see everybody celebrating, what it means is he's anti-Trump in his views.
Right.
I mean, that rejoicing that was going on was a little too loud for me. But I think McMaster, from everything I've read about him, he is very accomplished. He's a brilliant guy. He is not, go along with the program type of fella. He was over there with Petraeus, and whatever you say about General Petraeus, in Anbar province with that surge, they did turn that thing around so we could get out with a measure of dignity and not lose the war. So I'm sort of impressed with the guy. He has no experience in this snake pit of Washington, D.C., apparently, which is going to be difficult working with a lot of these folks. But again, the key question here is, do these generals, I think 3 of the 5 security guys are generals, do these generals really, are they committed to the policies which they fought to validate? Are they committed to those old wars? Or are they really, do they look at what Trump has proposed in terms of anti-interventionism, putting America first, staying out of these wars, working out some kind of relationship with Putin and the Russians? Are they with that, or are they going to resist that? So I think this is the battle. It's going to come up. It's going to between what Trump promised us was tomorrow and what a lot of these fellows represent and will defend, which was yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Pat, there's a story that I just came across. I think it's in Newsmax, or a Reuters story, and they're talking about how the Congress seems to be slow walking or just stalling the Trump agenda. I mean, they've already said there's going to be no Obamacare repeal or tax cuts. And Rand Paul apparently walked out of a meeting last week with the speaker when he heard talk about Obamacare's Medicaid expansion intact and creating tax credits. Your thoughts on this? Are they slow walking or indeed damning the Trump agenda on Capitol Hill?
Slow walking is what they do. I mean, how can you?
Not Nancy Pelosi.
Say we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare, and people come. Okay, you won. What's the replacement? We don't have one.
Yeah, exactly. They only had 8 years to come up with something, anything.
Exactly, and so, but I do agree. Now, this again with what I've talked about before. Trump has come to this town, he got 4% of the vote, which can tell you what kind of support he's got. He's probably got similar support if it were closet vote up on the Hill. And if these folks don't like his immigration program and they prefer an amnesty and they prefer the John McCain reform and the George Bush reform, then they just don't act. And if they don't, Trump can't get his program through. The same with taxes. Mm-hmm. You can bet, for example, you're going to need a border adjustment tax or a tariff if you're going to be serious about something like that and use the money to cut taxes on corporate small businesses and large businesses alike. You've got to have that done, and to do that, you got to get the cooperation of Congress. And I think those guys do not believe in the kind of controls on the border Trump does. They don't believe in the kind of tax program he does. And so I think slow walking is a good way to describe it. But that's, again, Congress is, with due respect, it's the first branch of government, and the Constitution lists all these powers, and they've surrendered a tremendous number of powers. They don't want responsibility. They don't want accountability. Douglas MacArthur said, military councils make cowards out of soldiers. And you get that big collective up there, and somebody's going to get them and say, look, if we do this, we're not coming back next year.
Right. Well, you said
that's what's important.
Yeah, you said slow walking is what they do. Somebody should have given Nancy Pelosi that memo when she was ramrodding, the Obama agenda, Obamacare, and all these regulations through Congress.
Well, the liberals believe in government action, and believe in the constant expansion of government power and programs and beneficiaries and employees because they are the party of government.
Yeah.
And the Republican Party, I've got a new book coming out, and in it, and I quote this Rob Reichley fellow in Fortune, that's about 45 years ago now, but he said Republicans can be broken down into the stalwarts, even the conservatives into the stalwarts, those who accept Social Security and Medicare and move their trench line further on and don't fight it. And then he called them the fundamentalists, and he mentioned me, the folks that wanted, do battle and take back territory. But most Republicans, even conservatives, are sort of stalwarts. They accept what has happened, and we set the defense line up down the road. We've now got about 40% of the economy, or 37%, controlled by government. I mean, it's not what it was in the 1950s.
Interesting. Pat Buchanan, thank you for being here, always bringing both a perceptive and historical perception to all of this.
To you, Ray.
Thank you, my friend. We'll talk soon. Up next, Melania leads the Melbourne rally with the Lord's Prayer, and some people become unhinged. We'll get your reaction. Raymond Arroyo sitting in for Laura Ingraham, and we're going to get into these new Department of Homeland Security guidelines. You will not want to miss these. They will affect all of our lives. The Laura Ingraham Show continues. She's at Ingraham Angle on Twitter. I'm at Raymond Arroyo on Twitter. More ahead. Stay right here. Your reaction to that? 855-40-LAURA. Did you like the idea of the First Lady intoning a prayer at a rally, at the start of a rally? This was apparently her idea, I'm told. It wasn't premeditated, but it was her idea, and she said, I'd like to start with a prayer. When you're in the belly of the beast and you're running a country like this, prayer is sometimes, should be your first recourse, and sometimes it's your last recourse as well. So I personally think this is a country that was founded on religious freedom and religious principles. Certainly morality is key to maintaining a republic like ours. So I thought this was actually a nice, symbolic moment for the First Family and the First Lady. Love to know what you thought. There's also an update of these immigration orders that are coming down, and I'm going to tell you about this as we go into the next hour. We are awaiting a formal announcement from the White House on the executive order update, but in the meantime, the Department of Homeland Security is set to release new guidelines. Wait till I tell you about these, and I will. We will continue in a moment. Now, I am told that Laura Ingraham is to join us in this next hour. She is returning from her assignment, a secret assignment. She was apparently with the president on Saturday. She was at that rally in Melbourne.
Yes, she was.
Was she directing the event?
I saw a nice picture with Bannon and Priebus. You see that on Twitter?
I did.
Right by the plane, yeah.
I did indeed. Remember to go to lifezet.com. We've got some great stories there. There was one I just pulled up. Where is it? We're talking about the amnesty for dreamers and how the president is wrestling with continuing that policy or maybe rolling it back a bit. We're not sure. LifeSet has some insights. Go there. You can find me on RaymondArroyo.com. I want to let you know Will Wilder 2, my sequel to the first Will Wilder book for middle grade readers, really the young at heart. The Lost Staff of Wonders hits bookstores March 7th. You can pre-order now. More info at RaymondArroyo.com. We'll be right back with those updated Department of Homeland Security guidelines. Stay right